On a stormy night, Emily Anderson, a dedicated event planner, is wrongfully accused of stealing a priceless necklace at one of the most prestigious galas of the year. Her world begins to fall apart as she's dragged to the police station, with the weight of the accusations crushing her. But Jack Mercer, heir to one of the wealthiest families in the city, feels an undeniable connection to Emily and decides to risk everything, his wealth, his family, and his reputation, to prove her innocence. As Jack digs deeper, he uncovers a web of lies and betrayal that stretches far beyond the theft, leading to devastating truths about his own family. In a world where trust is scarce, will love be enough to defeat the shadows of the past? Stay tuned for this story filled with twists, emotions, and the ultimate test of love and loyalty. The rain fell in relentless sheets that night, flooding the streets of the city and turning the cold air into a sharp bite. Emily Anderson felt the weight of it all, her wet clothes clinging to her as two police officers escorted her in handcuffs to the station. Each step echoed in her mind, a cruel reminder of how quickly her life had unraveled. Less than an hour ago, she had been overseeing one of the grandest events of the year, a gala hosted by none other than the Mercer family, known for their vast fortune and impeccable reputation. Now flashes from the paparazzi's cameras captured her humiliation as she was led into the station. The headlines would be brutal by morning, branding her a thief, her career in ruins. Emily sat in a cold interrogation room, trembling not from the cold, but from the sheer panic of what was happening. She had never imagined being in a situation like this. The accusation? Stealing a multi-million-dollar necklace, a family heirloom of the Mercers, from the event she had meticulously planned. Meanwhile, Jack Mercer sat in his luxury car, the rain pounding against the windows as he watched the police station from a distance. His heart was conflicted. He barely knew Emily, had only met her briefly during the gala preparations, but there was something about her that tugged at him, something he couldn't ignore. He had seen the way she worked tirelessly, the passion she had poured into every detail of the event, and the way she carried herself with grace and determination. And then, chaos. The alarms had sounded, security had swarmed, and in the blink of an eye, Emily was accused. All evidence seemed to point her way. She had access to the necklace, and her fingerprints were found on the display case. But Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. His instincts told him that Emily was innocent, and he was determined to find out the truth, no matter what it cost him. Inside the police station, Emily sat alone in the dimly lit room, her mind racing. Everything she had worked for, every achievement, every ounce of her reputation was crumbling in front of her. She had been at the top of her game, organizing high-profile events for elite clients, and now she was facing the end of her career, and possibly her freedom, over a crime she hadn't committed. Her chest tightened with anxiety as she thought about the look of disgust she had seen in the eyes of the Mercer family, particularly Victoria Mercer, Jack's mother, who had been quick to demand her arrest. Jack couldn't stay silent any longer. He stepped out of his car, braving the downpour, and marched into the police station, his jaw clenched with determination. He had grown up learning to trust only a select few, and his family had always taught him to be suspicious of outsiders. But something about this situation didn't sit right with him, and for once in his life, Jack was willing to go against everything his family believed in to find the truth. "Let me see her," Jack demanded as he approached the front desk, his voice calm but firm. The officer glanced up, recognizing his last name immediately. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mercer, but Ms. Anderson is under investigation. We can't allow visitors during questioning." Jack's eyes darkened. "This is a mistake. She didn't do it, and I'm going to prove it." There was a long, tense pause before the officer finally relented. "5 minutes, that's all I can give you." Moments later, Emily was brought into a small interrogation room where Jack was waiting. Her wrists were red from the handcuffs, her eyes hollow with exhaustion, but there was still a spark of resilience within her. When she saw Jack, her expression shifted from disbelief to confusion. Why was he here? What did he want with her? "I'm going to help you," Jack said softly but with conviction, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers. "I know you didn't steal the necklace. Something is wrong here, and I'm not going to rest until we figure out what really happened." Emily blinked, unsure whether to believe him. "Why would you risk your reputation for me? You don't even know me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Jack's lips pressed into a thin line. Sometimes, you just have to trust your gut. And mine's telling me you're innocent. Emily looked down at her cuffed hands, overwhelmed by the weight of the situation. I don't know how to prove that I'm not guilty, she muttered. Everything's stacked against me. Jack nodded slowly. Then let's start by finding out who framed you. In the days that followed, Emily was released on bail, but the accusations against her hung over her like a dark cloud. The media hounded her at every turn, painting her as the villain who had betrayed the trust of the city's elite. Despite Jack's intervention, his own family remained staunchly against her. Victoria Mercer, the matriarch, was especially vocal about Emily's guilt, convinced that the event planner had taken advantage of their generosity. Jack, however, was undeterred. He had quietly hired a team of private investigators, determined to find the truth behind the missing necklace. Emily, hesitant at first, slowly began to trust him. Together, they pored over details from the night of the gala, looking for anything that might prove her innocence. But as they dug deeper, they uncovered more than either of them had anticipated. One evening, as they sat in Jack's sleek penthouse overlooking the city, Emily's phone buzzed with a new email. It was from an anonymous source containing a single sentence. Check the security footage again. Something doesn't add up. Attached was a file, a snippet of video from the night of the gala. Emily's heart raced as she opened the file on Jack's laptop. The footage showed a part of the gala that the police hadn't reviewed in detail, the service entrance, where the caterers and staff had come and gone throughout the night. In the video, a man in a black suit slipped through the door, his face obscured, carrying a small velvet bag. Moments later, he reappeared without it. "Who is that?" Emily asked, her voice tense as she paused the footage. The image was grainy, but the figure's movements were deliberate, practiced. He had known exactly where to go and what to do. Jack's brow furrowed as he leaned closer to the screen. "I don't know. He's not part of the regular staff. But that bag, that's the one the necklace was in during the display. Whoever this is, he's involved." Emily's mind raced. If they could identify this man, they could prove that she hadn't been the one to steal the necklace. But there was still a problem. The footage had been tampered with. There was a gap in the video, a jump that made it impossible to see exactly what the man had done after leaving the room. "I'll have my tech team analyze it," Jack said, his voice steady but determined. "If there's more to this, we'll find it." As the investigation continued, Jack faced increasing pressure from his family. His mother, Victoria, was livid that he had sided with Emily, and his father, William Mercer, warned him about the consequences of tarnishing the family's reputation. But Jack couldn't shake the feeling that his family knew more than they were letting on. There were whispers, veiled comments from his parents that suggested the theft wasn't as straightforward as it seemed. Then one night, as Jack sat alone in his family's mansion, flipping through old files from his father's business dealings, he found something disturbing. Hidden among the papers was a series of transfers, large sums of money being funneled into an offshore account under a name he didn't recognize: Vincent Dawson. Jack's heart skipped a beat. He had heard that name before. Vincent Dawson was a shadowy figure in the city, known for his connections to high-end heists and underground dealings. If Dawson was involved, this was far bigger than just a stolen necklace. His mind reeled as he pieced together the implications. Someone in his family had been paying Dawson for something, and it wasn't legal. Determined to confront his father, Jack stormed into his father's private study late one night. William Mercer looked up from his desk, his face cold and expressionless, as Jack slammed the file down in front of him. "What the hell is this?" Jack demanded, his voice low but filled with fury. "Who is Vincent Dawson, and why are you funneling money to him?" William's eyes flickered with something Jack hadn't seen before: fear. He stood slowly, closing the file with a calm that only made Jack's anger burn hotter. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into, Jack," his father said, his voice measured. "This isn't your concern." Jack's fists clenched. "It is when someone's framing an innocent woman for something she didn't do. Is this all about protecting the family's reputation? Are you involved in the theft?" William's face tightened, but he didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the window, staring out at the sprawling Mercer estate. "I've spent my entire life building this empire," he began, his voice distant. Sometimes sacrifices have to be made to protect it. People like Emily, they're collateral damage. Jack's stomach twisted in disgust. Collateral damage? She's innocent, and you're letting her take the fall for something you did. William turned to face him, his expression hardening. You're naive, Jack. You don't understand how the world works. Dawson is dangerous. If we don't keep him satisfied, it won't just be our reputation at stake. It'll be our lives. Jack stared at his father, the weight of his words sinking in. This wasn't just about a theft. It was about power, control, and the lengths his family was willing to go to maintain their status. But Jack wasn't willing to be a part of it. Not anymore. I won't let you destroy her life for this, Jack said, his voice firm. If you won't tell the truth, I will. William's eyes narrowed. Be careful, Jack. You have no idea what you're up against. Emily, meanwhile, was starting to uncover more about the man in the footage. With the help of Jack's tech team, she had managed to enhance the video enough to identify a small tattoo on the man's wrist, an insignia linked to Dawson's criminal organization. The realization hit her hard. This wasn't just a case of petty theft. She had been caught in the middle of something much bigger than herself. Late one night, as Emily and Jack met in secret at a small diner on the outskirts of the city, they shared what they had discovered. Jack told her about his father's involvement with Dawson, and Emily showed him the tattoo from the footage. They're connected, Emily said, her voice filled with dread. Your father, he knew all along. Jack's face was grim. He knew, and he's been trying to cover it up ever since. Emily looked out the window at the rain pouring down, her heart heavy with the weight of everything they had uncovered. What do we do now? Jack reached across the table, taking her hand. We take them down, all of them, no matter what it costs. The rain intensified, hammering against the windows of Jack's penthouse as he and Emily finalized their plan. They had gathered all the evidence, the altered security footage, the offshore account tied to Dawson, and the undeniable proof of William Mercer's involvement. But as the stakes grew higher, so did the danger. Jack knew confronting Dawson would be risky, especially after discovering his father's deep ties to the criminal underworld. But it was no longer just about clearing Emily's name. It was about exposing the rot that had corrupted his family from within. Their first step was to lure Dawson into the open. Jack made a risky call, pretending to be on his father's side, asking for a meeting under the guise of protecting their family's secrets. The location was carefully chosen, an abandoned warehouse near the docks, far from the prying eyes of the public. It was a place where business deals like these had been conducted for years, and where things could easily go wrong. The night of the meeting arrived, and the air was thick with tension. Jack stood in the shadows, waiting, his heart pounding in his chest. Emily was nearby, hidden but ready to record everything. They needed Dawson to incriminate himself, and with Jack's carefully laid trap, they hoped he would let something slip. As the minutes ticked by, a sleek black car pulled up to the warehouse. Jack's breath caught in his throat as the door opened, and out stepped Vincent Dawson, flanked by two burly bodyguards. He was exactly as Jack had imagined, tall, imposing, with an air of danger that surrounded him like a cloak. His cold, calculating eyes scanned the area before he approached Jack. So the prodigal son finally steps into the family business, Dawson said with a smirk, his voice as smooth as silk but laced with menace. What can I do for you, Jack? Jack's hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he forced himself to stay calm. I want to make sure Emily Anderson's problem disappears, he said, his voice steady. She's too much of a liability, and I don't want her dragging the family name through the mud. Dawson's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of suspicion crossing his face. I didn't expect you to care so much about a simple event planner, he said slowly, especially one who's caused so much trouble for your family. Jack swallowed hard, knowing he had to tread carefully. She's not worth the risk, he continued, but I need assurances that this will be handled discreetly, no more mistakes. Dawson chuckled darkly, crossing his arms as he studied Jack. You're smarter than I gave you credit for, he said, nodding in approval. But you don't need to worry. Emily's already been framed perfectly. The stolen necklace, the tampered footage, it's all set up to make her look guilty. She'll never clear her name. Jack's stomach twisted with disgust, but he kept his expression neutral. He needed Dawson to keep talking. "You're sure no one will trace it back to you or my father?" Jack pressed, his voice low. Dawson's smirk widened. "Your father paid me well to make sure of that. No one will ever know about his involvement. And as for you, Jack, if you're smart, you'll stay out of it. Let the girl take the fall. It's better that way." The weight of Dawson's words hung in the air like a death sentence, but Jack wasn't done yet. He glanced toward the far corner of the warehouse where Emily was hidden, capturing every word on camera. This was it, the evidence they needed to bring Dawson down. Just as Jack prepared to make his move, a sudden sound echoed through the warehouse, the screech of tires on wet pavement. Jack's heart sank as he recognized the car pulling up, his father's. William Mercer stepped out of the vehicle, his face pale and tense. He had figured out what Jack was doing and had come to stop him. "Jack!" William's voice rang out, filled with panic. "What are you doing here?" Dawson's eyes darkened, his amusement fading as he realized what was happening. "So this was a setup," he muttered, taking a step back. His bodyguards shifted, readying themselves for action. Jack turned to face his father, his pulse racing. "You need to tell the truth," he said, his voice trembling with anger. "This has gone too far, Dad. You can't keep protecting Dawson." William's face twisted with guilt, but his eyes were filled with fear. "You don't understand, Jack. If Dawson goes down, we all go down. The deals, the bribes, everything." The weight of his father's confession hit Jack like a freight train. It wasn't just about the necklace. His family had been involved in criminal activity for years, and they had used people like Dawson to keep it all under wraps. His father had been willing to sacrifice Emily, and countless others, to protect their empire. "I won't be a part of this," Jack said, his voice firm despite the turmoil inside him. "Emily is innocent, and I'm going to prove it." Before William could respond, Dawson lunged toward Jack, fury flashing in his eyes. "You little traitor," he snarled, reaching for a gun hidden beneath his coat. In the blink of an eye, chaos erupted. The bodyguards moved in, and a struggle ensued. Emily, still hidden, watched in horror as Jack fought to fend off Dawson and his men. She knew she had to act fast. Grabbing her phone, she dialed the police, her hands shaking as she whispered the address. Help was on the way, but it would take time, and Jack was outnumbered. As the fight raged on, Jack managed to knock Dawson's gun from his hand, sending it skidding across the floor. But Dawson wasn't giving up easily. With a wild look in his eyes, he lunged at Jack again, knocking him to the ground. Emily couldn't stand by any longer. She emerged from her hiding place, grabbing a metal pipe from the corner of the warehouse and charging toward Dawson. With all her strength, she swung the pipe, striking him across the back. He crumpled to the ground, stunned. The bodyguards hesitated, unsure of what to do now that their boss was incapacitated. Jack, breathing heavily, pushed himself to his feet, grateful for Emily's intervention. But the danger wasn't over yet. Just as they thought they had won, William Mercer stepped forward, his face twisted in despair. "Jack, you don't understand," he pleaded. "If Dawson talks, everything we've built will fall apart. Our family will be ruined." Jack looked at his father, his heart breaking. "Maybe it should," he said quietly. "I'm not going to let you destroy more lives just to protect a lie." In that moment, the sound of sirens filled the air, and the police burst into the warehouse. Dawson was arrested, and his bodyguards surrendered without a fight. William stood frozen, staring at the chaos around him, knowing that his empire was crumbling before his eyes. As the police led Dawson away in handcuffs, Emily and Jack stood together, their hands clasped tightly. It was over. They had the proof they needed, and the truth had finally come to light. But the cost had been high. Jack had lost his father's trust, and his family's legacy would never be the same. The aftermath of the warehouse confrontation was a whirlwind of flashing lights and chaos. Dawson had been taken into custody, and his criminal empire, which had operated in the shadows for years, was finally collapsing. News outlets buzzed with reports of his arrest, and with each new detail, The extent of his influence over the city's elite became clear. But the most shocking revelation was the involvement of the Mercer family. Jack stood in the cold rain outside the police station, staring into the distance, the weight of the evening's events pressing down on him. His father, William Mercer, had been detained for questioning, and though Jack knew the evidence against him was damning, a part of him still couldn't believe what had happened. His father, the man who had raised him, was involved in criminal dealings that went far beyond a stolen necklace. The betrayal cut deep, but Jack knew that the truth needed to come out. Emily stood beside him, her hand resting gently on his arm. She had been quiet since the police arrived, her mind still reeling from everything they had uncovered. Dawson's plan had been far more elaborate than she had ever imagined, and she couldn't shake the feeling of guilt for doubting herself in the beginning. "I'm sorry," Jack said quietly, breaking the silence. His voice was thick with emotion as he turned to face her. "For everything. For what my family put you through." Emily looked up at him, her eyes soft but determined. "It's not your fault, Jack. You did everything you could to make it right. If it weren't for you, I'd still be sitting in a jail cell, branded a thief." Jack shook his head, the guilt still gnawing at him. "But my family, they caused this. My father, His voice cracked, and he struggled to continue. He chose to protect his empire over doing the right thing. Emily squeezed his hand gently. "You're not your father. You chose differently. You stood up for the truth, even when it cost you everything. That's what matters." The words offered some comfort, but the sting of betrayal still lingered. Jack's world had been turned upside down, and he knew that the road ahead would be difficult. The Mercer name, once synonymous with wealth and prestige, was now tainted by scandal. And his relationship with his family, particularly with his mother, Victoria, would never be the same. Over the following weeks, the investigation into Dawson's network of crime expanded, revealing layers of corruption that reached far beyond the Mercer family. Jack worked closely with the authorities, providing the evidence he and Emily had gathered and testifying against his father. The city's elite, once untouchable, were now facing justice, and the Mercer empire was on the brink of collapse. Emily, too, was slowly rebuilding her life. With her name cleared, she returned to her work, but the experience had changed her. The betrayal, the accusations, and the fight for her innocence had left scars, but they had also made her stronger. She no longer felt like a victim. She had faced the storm and come out the other side, more resilient than ever. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Emily and Jack stood on the balcony of her modest apartment. The air was crisp, and the sound of distant traffic hummed in the background. They hadn't spoken much about what would come next, about their future, but tonight, the question hung in the air between them. "What happens now?" Emily asked softly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Jack leaned against the railing, his eyes thoughtful. "I don't know," he admitted. "Everything's different now. My family, my father. It's all gone." Emily nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "But you're free, Jack. Free to build something new, something better." Jack looked at her, the corners of his mouth lifting in a small, sad smile. "And what about you? What do you want, Emily?" Emily's heart skipped a beat at the question. She had spent so long fighting to clear her name, she hadn't thought much about what would come after. But as she stood here beside Jack, the man who had risked everything to help her, she realized that she didn't want to face the future alone. "I want a fresh start," she said, her voice steady, "but I want it with you." Jack's expression softened, and he reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then that's what we'll do," he said quietly. "We'll start over, together." Months passed and the dust began to settle. The Mercer family's name no longer dominated the headlines, but the fallout from William Mercer's actions continued to ripple through the city. Jack, who had once been poised to take over his father's empire, chose a different path. He distanced himself from the family's remaining assets, using his influence to help those affected by Dawson's criminal activities. Emily's life had taken a turn for the better as well. With her name restored, she had launched her own event planning business, one that focused on helping those who, like her, had been wrongfully accused or mistreated. Her work became a beacon of hope for others seeking a second chance, and she found fulfillment in knowing that she was making a difference. As for her relationship with Jack, it had deepened in ways neither of them had expected. They had been through so much together: betrayal, danger, heartbreak, and it had forged a bond that was unbreakable. They had both lost so much, but in each other, they had found something far more valuable: trust, love, and the courage to build a future together. One evening, as they walked hand in hand along the quiet beach near Emily's new office, Jack paused, turning to face her. The setting sun bathed them in a golden glow, and for the first time in months, Jack felt a sense of peace. "I never thought I'd find this," Jack said softly, his thumb gently brushing over Emily's knuckles. "A life that feels real, not just built on lies and expectations." Emily smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. "Neither did I," she admitted. "But I think we've earned it, don't you?" Jack nodded, his eyes filled with warmth. "We have." As they stood there, the waves lapping at the shore and the sun dipping below the horizon, they both knew that the future, though uncertain, was theirs to shape. They had faced the worst of the world together, and now they were ready to embrace whatever came next, side by side. Thank you for watching this story of redemption, love, and justice. If this journey touched your heart, leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and of course, subscribe to our channel, Driven by Stories, for more stories that will move and inspire you every week. Until next time.